is that than what the Catherine, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, getting a vote on this moratorium. Catherine, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, getting a vote on this moratorium. It already passed the Assembly. One of the issues, though, is I believe there are multiple ban bills that are in the Senate right now. You want to vote, obviously, on the same as that the Assembly passed?
Absolutely, yes. Assemblyman Sweeney's bill already passed, and now it's in front of the Senate, and it's up to the IDC leader, Senator Klein, and Senator Skelos to bring it to the floor for a vote.
David Carlucci, who is an IDC member, he's actually carrying a ban bill of his own. How different is that than what than the measure that passed in the Assembly?
He has his own moratorium bill, and they would both direct the state to wait until we get further information about fracking and its health impacts before making any decisions. But the bill that we're working on, the bill that already passed the Assembly, that's the one that would call on the state to do its own health impact analysis and really get into the meat of what are the health impacts that are going on around the country and how would they impact New Yorkers before any decisions are made. And right now, it's being totally bottled up in chamber politics. I mean, that's the beginning and the end of it. We know that the votes are there, that if this came to the floor, it would pass. And yet here we have two senators, Senator Klein and Senator Skelos, who are keeping their 61 colleagues from participating in basic democracy and just casting a vote.
So, I mean, why is this up to both of them? Obviously, they both have to come up with a solution or come up to some sort of agreement before a bill can go to the floor for a vote. But necessarily Governor Cuomo is not necessarily going to sign it. So why is the impetus right now on Skelos and Klein to get it done?
Because this is where it has to go. I mean, it has to pass the Senate before it can even get to the governor's desk. And in conversations with business leaders, the governor has said that he knows that the bill would pass with a veto-proof majority in the Senate if the Senate were to pass it into law. So that's why we're out here saying this is very simple. Senator Klein and Senator Skelos need to bring it to the floor for a vote.
This isn't necessarily an issue that the Senate Republicans are altogether on anyway. I mean, you've got Greg Ball, who is very much, even though he tends to be very conservative, but he's also somebody who is a hydrofracking skeptic. And then you've also got, though, Tom O'Mara and Tom Libous, two senators from the Southern Tier area, who are very much in favor of drilling. They think it can bring some economic benefits to the area. So you've got some internal politics within the GOP conference in and of itself. Isn't that something that is a consideration in all of this?
Well, at the end of the day, we know the votes are there for the bill to pass. So anybody who wants to vote no, that is their right. But they can't vote on anything unless the leaders bring it to the floor for a vote.
But there's no guarantee also that the governor would sign such legislation anyway. And correct me if I'm wrong, because you know a lot more about this than I do, but David Paterson actually vetoed a moratorium ban and put his own in place. Don't you think the governor would prefer to control this process in and of itself?
I think that's probably the governor's preference, but I think that if this were to get through the Senate, the overwhelming support that the bill has, that New Yorkers have for the bill, would come to bear on the governor and his decision-making process. And I'm confident that this would move the governor significantly if they got to his desk.
It seems that at this point that we are at with the hydrofracking debate, that state leaders really just want to keep the status quo going, which is having this health impact assessment continue on with no real end in sight. I mean, they do say that they're working on and they will come up with some sort of resolution here. But don't you think that they just want to continue where they're at right now and maybe just leave it up to the governor's office? I mean, because this is something that could count against them in an election year.
Well, where we're at right now is a place of complete uncertainty. The state is conducting some sort of health review. Nobody knows what this is. Nobody knows what questions are being asked, who's asking the questions, who's answering the questions. We don't know what types of conclusions are coming from them. We don't know how the process will unfold once any conclusions are made. I mean, this has been an example of policy by press release since the day the governor's office announced it. So this bill would actually call for a health impact assessment, which is a very defined process that involves people from all over the state.
Are you disappointed that lawmakers, though, even the ones who are not necessarily in favor of fracking, are you disappointed that they're not trying to get more information out of the legislature? I know there have been some that have been very vocal about it. Tony Avella has been one of them. But do you think they should be maybe a little bit more activist in their approach to getting more info from the governor's office?
Well, I think that when it comes right down to it, we've got 8 days left in the legislative session. And we've got a tremendous opportunity here where the Senate can stand up and say, we're not going to just wait for the governor for the answers on this. We're going to go forward and dictate how the state's going to consider whether or not we move forward with fracking and dictate that we're going to do a health impact assessment. And that's exactly what needs to be done. But we've got leadership bottling up the bill, making sure that there aren't any votes being taken on it, and stopping democracy in its tracks.
Do you think this is, and the IDC despises when people say this is a test of their strength or power in the Senate, but they have been pushed on a variety of issues, including public financing, including the abortion component and the women's equality agenda, and now hydrofracking as well. Do you see this as a test of whether this coalition is actually worthy of leading the Senate?
Well, I mean, when you look at what's going on in the Senate right now, this is a situation that the IDC created, and this is a situation, this power sharing that we have going on is a direct result of their actions. Now, they've labeled fracking as one of their priorities. So the people of New York are looking to them to protect us from fracking, and that's it. So in my mind, you can't create a storm and then cry when it rains. This is on the IDC, this is on Senator Klein and Senator Skelos to work this out, bring this to the floor, and allow their members to vote.
Do you foresee any sort of resolution on this? I know we've talked about this before, but do you see any resolution on this before Election Day 2014? Because the conventional wisdom on this is that the governor, the legislature, doesn't want to make a decision before they're all up for re-election come 2014, considering how much of a third rail this has really become for New York politics.
Well, you know what? I don't know exactly where this is going to lead. The crystal ball broke a couple years back based on what we've seen. But again, we've got an opportunity that's here right now. There are 8 days left of the legislative session, and if the Senate leaves town without having acted on this moratorium bill, then it's going to be on them if the governor moves forward and begins to permit.
All righty. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but Katherine Nadeau, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you.